Hello, everyone. Today we're going to have another little reading from Son of My Will. And I wanted to back up just a little bit because where we are in the story of Luisa and the Son of My Will is at this juncture when uh, Father de Francia has died. And but Luisa and her confessor continue to, along with the Archbishop, continue to um, pursue this dream that they had had of having the Daughters of Divine Zeal, which was uh, a, a convent, a group of women specifically dedicated to the divine will. And so that's kind of where we're at in the story. And so I wanted to start where actually, if you have the book, here's the book. And actually, before we start, I wanted to show you a few of the pictures that are in the book. I'm sorry if I knew how to, I guess I could scan them, but hopefully you'll be able to see some of these pictures. This is Luisa in her bed. Luisa. Um, and, Luisa was a lace maker. And so Luisa was, confined to her bed and constantly working, excuse me, to make lace. Sorry. Um, so where we're starting here is as we're going into this um, establishment of this convent in Corrado, and at this point, Luisa, although there was some talk of um, possibly being someplace that um, being in another location other than Corrado, but Luisa uh, said that she had made a promise to God that she would stay in Corrado. And so I begin on the first full paragraph on page 126. Actually, concerning the idea of establishing a convent of the Daughters of Divine Zeal and an orphanage in Corrado, remember that Father de Francia actually was canonized as a saint, uh, really highlighting his work as establishing orphanages. And so he was did a lot of work with orphanages, and so the connection with an orphanage was always made in the convent in Corrado with the Daughters of Divine Zeal. Luisa imagines something bigger. As she explains in her next letter to Father Annibale, she says, in fact, that she understands his holy intentions and hopes it will be able to form a small army of souls to live completely in the holy divine will. So as she and Father de Francia were talking about this, they were talking about, what was this going to look like, and what were they going to do, how are they going to go about this, and uh, Luisa said, a small army of souls that live a life more of heaven than of earth. No greater glory could be given to Jesus, and no greater good could be provided for souls. For this to be realized, the priest will have to obtain the land needed for the house in his will. Sound familiar? In fact, for this first act in the divine will to be accomplished, sweet Jesus would have granted many graces and help so that the future residents will have no other life than his will, no other sign and signature than the fiat. In a word, they would be the little daughters of the divine will. With the help of the Sumidomo sisters donating the land, Father Annibale works to get and begins the construction in Corrado. This will be completed, however, after his death. The one responsible for all the paperwork and making sure the work moves forward will be Father Pantaleone Palma, who at this stage is increasingly involved in a close relationship with Luisa. The House of the Daughters of Divine Zeal in Corrado will be inaugurated August the 7th, 1928, by Archbishop Giuseppe Maria Leo, with a Mass celebrated for the first time in what was called the Dear Little Chapel because of its small size. Later, Father de Palma was able to celebrate with the specific intention of consecrating the house to the divine will, thus carrying out the will of the founder. I have several pictures here. In the fact, a report from the house details how in the afternoon, Father Palma gave a very impassioned talk, and recalling our venerated founder, Canon A.M. de Francia, he revealed how it had been the founder's desire to have a house in the city of Corrado, a house of the Congregation of the Daughters of Divine Zeal, which he founded to hold in great consideration the new doctrine that our Lord wanted to reveal to a chosen soul, whom the most devoted Father knew and whose holiness he was attracted to. We know that that is Luisa. The doctrine being that of the divine will from which great spiritual gifts are derived. The Reverend Father Palma, continues talking about how the Father had designated him to be involved with getting the above mentioned house established in Corrado and how it was finally achieved. He talked about the special purpose to which the poor daughters of divine zeal are committed. That is, to make the heavenly doctrine from above known through their lowliness, either by word or example, or whichever way it may be. But for the work to be finished and every promise kept, Luisa must go and live in that house. So at around 8 o'clock that evening, the new Mother General of the Daughters of Divine Zeal, Mother M. Cristina Figura, goes by car to Luisa and offers her once again the late founder's invitation. Obeying her confessor, Father Benedetto Calvi, Luisa accepts, and and her sister Angelina leave their residence in Via Ospedale Vecchio, I think it's pronounced, 14. And I want to just stop here and mention real quickly Angelina. And Angelina is mentioned throughout this writing because Angelina was Luisa's sister who never married, who did not become a nun, but who dedicated her life to caring for her sister. Remember that Luisa was confined to bed, and so she needed someone there with her to help her with all of her needs. And this is what Angelina dedicated her life to. And so when they had this convent was built, it was assumed Angelina would come along with Luisa. At the convent, she's given a room adjacent to the chapel, facing the altar, from where she could follow the Mass and see the tabernacle very clearly. Angelina was given a small room behind the sacristy. So both of them lived right next to the chapel. Angelina's room was behind the sacristy of the chapel, and Luisa was given a room so that from her bed she could view the Mass, she could see the monstrance, she could view the Holy Eucharist from her bed. It says Luisa takes part in all the moments of prayer with the sisters, and most of all, she is in the perpetual company of Jesus in the sacrament. So the sacrament was always exposed, and Luisa was right there where she could see the Blessed Sacrament at all times, right from her bed. She describes the move by saying that her confessor came to her, but not at his usual hour, to have her comply out of obedience. That is, to give in to the Reverend Mother's superior request and make her happy by moving into the new Antonian Institute. Luisa tries to stall and resists a bit, recalling that she had thought any move, and only if the Lord had wanted it, would happen in April when it was warmer. Therefore, it would be something discussed at that point in time. Now, however, she has to give in to her confessor's insistence. So, around 9:30 at night, they accompany her to the house of the divine will and get her situated in the little room that had been prepared for her. Mother Cecilia, the superior, and another four sisters go to the house in Corrado. In addition, 9 orphans also relocate there from the house in Trani. On the evening of her arrival, the Mother General introduces all of the sisters to Luisa, who, according to the house records, do not miss the opportunity to speak to each one about the divine will and how to adhere to it, and habitually live in it, carrying out the responsibilities assigned to them out of obedience. And I want to show you, we have a picture here of Luisa here with those 4 sisters who accompanied her. This is when she moved into the house of divine zeal. You know, it's funny because Luisa um, many times was reluctant to um, make changes or um, sort of make a move unless it had been very much um, sort of uh, sealed by Jesus. You know, that she felt confident that this is exactly what Jesus wanted. But she was also very much um, obedient to her confessor and to her superiors because Jesus had told her, obeying your confessor will come before obey. If I tell you something and your confessor tells you something, you do what your confessor tells you. And so the confessor comes to her and says, no, we're going now. She said, okay, I guess we're going now. So she said, about alone that first night, she cannot take her eyes off the little door of the tabernacle, which from where she is lying can be seen perfectly. The flickering flame of the votive light seems like it is about to go out, and Louisa feels her heart shudder as she is afraid that Jesus might be left in the dark. Finally, Jesus visits her in that house too, and holding her tight in his arms, he reassures her, saying not to be afraid about the lamp, because it will not go out, and if it must, he has her, his living lamp, whose flickering tells him more the flickering Eucharistic lamp. I love you, I love you, I love you. It is precisely this love that allows Louisa's will to unite to Jesus' will to form only one. 2 days later, Luisa receives Vincenzo Ripoli, a lawyer, and Archbishop Giuseppe Leo, who offers her his congratulations because now she's so close to Jesus in the sacrament. According to the house records, he brings her as a gift a telegram addressed to her conveying the Holy Father's blessing, signed by Cardinal Gaspari. The same day, Father Pantaleone Palma gathers the entire community into the chapel and solemnly reads the prayer of consecration to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and to the divine will, a prayer that will always be recited at Mass on Sundays before the blessing. Of all the many recollections of Louisa's time with her sisters, one worth relating is her first outing in the garden that surrounds the house, which in those days was located on the outskirts of the city, in the middle of wide open fields used for growing vegetables. It is quite moving how Louisa emphasizes that 40 years have gone by since the last time she had been out in the fresh air. She has been living in bed since she was 23. To bring her into the garden on that beautiful day in April, to use a chair with wheels. Seeing herself surrounded by the orphans, living at the Institute, she certainly would have been reminded of her own childhood walks at the Manor Farm in Desperate Tower and her conversations with nature. Now, remember that when she was a young girl growing up, her family would leave this town of Corrado and they would go out to where her father had his farm. And they would live out there during the growing season to plant and tend and harvest their crops. There was no church there, there was no mass there. And it was called Desperate Towers. And so being out in this field, being out in this, in the middle of this field where the convent was, reminded her of her childhood and the wonderful times that she had, even though she felt, far away from Jesus in that she could not, um, she couldn't attend mass. Heading outside, she immediately feels bombarded by the sun's rays, which seem like they want to be the first to greet her with her kiss of light. What a joy for Louisa, after so many years, to find herself before the sun, an image Jesus used so many times as an analogy for talking to her about his adorable will. And so begins her exchanges with the creatures of the creation that surrounds her, and where Louisa engages with the children and the sisters who accompany her. She asks everyone to give tit for tat and throw a kiss to the sun, kissing it in it that divine will that sustains it. She feels stunned not just by the sun, but also by its warmth. Then there is the wind, almost trying to compete with the sun, that tries to restore her with its warm caress. She feels down to its core the touch, the life, the breath, the air, the love of the divine fiat in the sun, in the wind, and in the blue sky. It seems that she is experiencing firsthand how all created things are like veils that conceal the divine will that created them. Now, turning her attention to Jesus, she asks him in curious question. Many times the divine teacher explained to her that whoever lives in his divine will is truly a brother and sister of all created things. She wants to verify whether her sister, the sun, recognizes her by staring straight into the sun without being blinded. So, turning her gaze to look at the center of the sun, the light seems to be caressing her pupils without blinding her. She can look at its core and catch sight of a sea of clear and beautiful light. It is really true, Louisa exclaims, that the sun symbolizes the infinite, endless sea of the divine fiat's light. In her inner dialogue with Jesus, he explains to her that each and every created thing is able to recognize whoever lives in the divine will because by perceiving the power of the divine fiat in that creature, it recognizes the supremacy that God gives that creature over all of creation. It was already like this in the very beginning when God, in creating Adam and Eve, gave them Eden as their home, and they were happy and holy in harmony with all of creation. For Louisa, the garden at the Institute is an, albeit pale, reminder of Eden and how God has placed his presence in man, giving him life in his holy will. Louisa will stay at that house until October 15th, 1938, when a storm triggered by the Holy Office will be unleashed upon her and her writings. With the opening of the house, Father Benedetto Calvi is appointed chaplain of the Institute and confessor of the little orphans being cared for there. He is also the coadjutor of the parish of St. Dominic and leads the Linguini youth group at the town's recreational center. Louisa's path is leaving an ever deeper impression on him and is binding him to taking part in a life that will soon prove to be not in the least bit easy. And that is the end of chapter 9 in Son of My Will. So the next time we meet, we're going to be going into Louisa's writings. And when we get into Louisa's writings, this is when things are going to get a little heated, a little controversial. And we're going to learn about how um, Louisa approach the writings, misunderstandings, condemnations of the writings, um, the trials and tribulations that had to walk through. They had to walk through in order to get the writings. And we're still doing this, aren't we? We're in the last revision of the writings now. So this examination of the writings has been long and very tumultuous in many ways. So this is where we're going next. I hope you'll follow me next on Chapter 10, Luisa's Writings, a new publication. This starts on page 131 of the writings. And we will go into, as we're bringing this, really, as Luisa begins, and the others who are involved begin bringing these writings to the world. So until next time, remember to stay in His will. Bye-bye.